We begin in Washington, D.C., where the president is pushing back against what he calls big drug and people flows coming across the U.S.-Mexico border. He made the comments on Easter Sunday, lashing out against Mexico and promising no legislative fix for young immigrants known as dreamers. Heather Sells tells us the story.
The future of hundreds of thousands of young immigrants known as dreamers is in jeopardy once again after the president promised on Sunday no more DACA deal. The president made his comments as he headed into an Easter church service with the First Lady.
A lot of people are coming in because they want to take advantage of DACA, and we're going to have to really see. They had a great chance. The Democrats blew it.
So what did the president mean? He also tweeted earlier on Sunday about caravans coming after news reports that a group called People Without Borders had just organized a massive group of 1,000 Central Americans on a trek for the U.S. border. Trump said Mexico is doing very little, if anything, to stop people and drugs from coming over the border. As a result, he threatened to end the free trade agreement known as NAFTA, which Mexico wants, and accused the new immigrants of trying to take advantage of DACA. President Obama started DACA in 2012 to help young adults brought to the U.S. illegally as children. But no one coming over the border right now can apply for the program as it's closed to new entrants. Mexico is pushing back against the president's remarks, saying the two countries work together daily on migration issues. Washington, meanwhile, is trying to understand whether or not the president is bluffing on DACA. Although he tried to end the program last year and asked Congress to find a solution, he has spoken warmly of the DACA recipients known as dreamers.
We are going to deal with DACA with heart.
Truly, it should be a bill of love.
The president is also tweeting about the need for a border wall, frustrated that Congress has not funded it. When it comes to DACA, Trump's hands have been tied by the courts, so it's ultimately in the hands of Congress, which so far has failed to send a bill to the president's desk. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Thank you, Heather. Here's a look at some of the other headlines we're following in the CBN newsroom. China continues to raise tariffs on U.S. products. President Xi Jinping says he is responding to a U.S. tariff hike on steel and aluminum. So far, the country has raised import duties on a $3 billion list of U.S. pork, apples, and nuts. The tariff increase is expected to hit America's farm states the hardest. Thousands of teachers across the country are skipping school today. They are on strike, demanding better pay and benefits. The strike is shutting down entire districts in Arizona, Kentucky, and Oklahoma. This comes nearly a month after teachers in West Virginia went on strike. The largest rebel group in Syria has begun to evacuate. The Army of Islam can be seen here leaving from eastern Ghouta. This comes after the group agreed to a deal for its fighters. Now eastern Ghouta is under government control. More than 1,500 people have died from the civil war in the last month. You can find these and other stories at cbnnews.com. Police say it may have been no accident when a Washington state family ran off a scenic cliff in Northern California 1 week ago. Inside the vehicle was a family of 8, Sarah and Jennifer Hart, who were married, and their 6 adopted children. The couple and 3 of the children are confirmed dead, while 3 others are feared dead, including Devont Hart, a 15-year-old who captured the hearts of Americans when he was photographed hugging a white police officer with a tear in his eye during a rally in support of protests in Ferguson, Missouri back in 2014. Police say the vehicle's software shows it was stopped at a scenic pull-off in Mendocino County before it sped off the cliff, plunging 100 feet onto rocks in the Pacific Ocean. Before the crash, reports indicate some of the children fled to neighbors' homes seeking refuge and food, prompting one neighbor to call Child Protective Services. Moving overseas, Israel's military may enter the Gaza Strip to stop Hamas from provoking violent clashes. The warning came from Israel's defense minister after 17 people were killed in a border conflict Friday. Israel says most of them were members of terror groups. And as my colleague Chris Mitchell explains, the violence may continue for at least the next 6 weeks.
The protests began Friday, the first day of a Palestinian March of Return to take back the land of Israel. Hamas encouraged Gazans to rush the Israeli border.
We have organized and will continue to organize cultural, social, and sporting activities to distract the youths from confronting the occupation soldiers. But as you see, the soldiers keep provoking the protesters to drag them into a circle of violence.
Israel had warned that its troops would be armed with live fire, but an estimated 30,000 protesters mobilized anyway, many armed with Molotov cocktails, burning tires, and rocks. Much of the world is blaming Israel for the violence, but Israel says Hamas will resort to anything, including the use of women and children as human shields in its war against their nation.
They've fired rockets towards Israel. They've attempted to infiltrate the border between Israel, a sovereign border. They've fired guns towards Israel. They've thrown Molotov cocktails. This is in no way peaceful. This is violence.
Author and journalist David Bedeen has documented the Palestinian fight against Israel for decades. He says Hamas and others seek more than just a public relations victory in Gaza. And he says the UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, is funding and promoting their cause.
And this is the first stage, which will last for 6 weeks. In the next 6 weeks, all the schools in UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Work Agency, throughout the country, not only in Gaza, also in Judea, Samaria, and in Jerusalem, will be having programs to promote the right of return march on May 15th, when the children will be commanded to take back the homes they lost, or their grandparents lost, in 1948.
Bedeen says it's no accident that the protest coincides with Israel's 70th anniversary and with the Trump administration's plan to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem in May.
Stage 2 will be much more massive, much more aggressive, and much more lethal in certain respects. And no one's ready for this. And I keep asking the people in the Israeli army, are you ready for the eventuality of children coming at you with guns? There's no real preparation for that.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Coming up, conservative censorship will break down why groups in Western Europe are being shut down on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. And welcome back to CBN News Watch. You know, in George Orwell's 1984, he wrote about a future in which all information was controlled. Get this, even an improper expression on your face was a punishable offense. Well, welcome to Orwell's future. Now, the leftist media is trying to eradicate certain opinions from the internet. Dale Hurd has the story.
Conservatives are feeling the heavy hand of censorship in the United States and across Western Europe. Their social media accounts are being banned, blocked, and canceled on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook, often over criticism of Islam or immigration. British anti-Islamization activist Tommy Robinson has had his Twitter account suspended again after he tweeted that Islam promotes killing. A German activist received a 6-month suspended jail sentence for calling Islam a fascist ideology. A 65-year-old Swedish woman faced charges for saying immigration from the Third World will lead to low IQs. She was only cleared because authorities couldn't prove it was her. 2 weeks ago, 3 conservative activists were refused entry into Britain because Britain's border police said they were likely to incite tensions between local communities in the United Kingdom. One was interrogated as a terrorist and was asked if she was a, quote, Christian extremist. This is the same British border police which allowed more than 400 former ISIS fighters to return to Britain for, quote, reintegration. Authorities in Britain now seem more interested in fighting hate speech on the internet than fighting crime, and are warning social media users that their comments are being monitored. But Sweden is taking the most aggressive approach against free speech, with a proposed new law that would make it a serious offense to embarrass the Swedish government internationally, and another that would make it harder to show that immigrants are responsible for most violent crime. Crime is now so bad in some parts of Sweden, there's been talk of calling out the army to help the police. But the new law would ban the public use of government data that could identify the ethnic origins of criminals.
We are moving into authoritarian state, actually.
Johan Westerholm runs a website critical of uncontrolled immigration in Sweden, but he's not sure how much longer before it's shut down.
If I report in a way that puts Sweden in a bad standing or in a bad position in a relationship to other countries, even if what I'm reporting is true, is relevant, and is fact-based, that might be a criminal act. So that might be that I might have to go to prison for life for that kind of reporting.
If you can't fix the problem, punish the critics. That's the new strategy in Sweden, where the establishment realizes it can no longer hide the truth about Sweden's immigration disaster.
We call the critics foul names and say that the problem is racism. That's the problem. The reason why immigrants are not getting jobs is because of racism.
Iranian-born Swedish lawmaker Hanif Bali takes heavy criticism for his opposition to Sweden's immigration policy, even though he himself is an immigrant.
I'm not only called racist, I'm also called Uncle Tom, and I'm also called house nigger. I've been compared to Dr. Mengele, and it's not from, just average people. This is, well-established opinion journalists and politicians.
The Swedish media pioneered what is now called doxing, exposing the identities and addresses of people who express the wrong opinions online. This video we showed you 4 years ago shows a Swedish journalist going to the home of a man who posted in a right-wing forum, and then publishing the video nationwide. The man reportedly lost his job. This group, with a name that means Internet Hate Surveyor, hunts down politically incorrect speech and reports people to the authorities. It receives funding from the Swedish government. But Sweden's worsening crackdown on free speech will do nothing to fix any of the real problems that have created the speech in the first place. It's as if the government thinks if it can just stop people from talking negatively about the problems will go away.
There is not a single study about how immigration has causally affected crime in Sweden. That's absurd, I would argue. The government, even in the last 12 years, has stopped publishing the statistics. So nobody knows, really, what percentage of total crime last year was committed by immigrants. The numbers are collected, but not used.
And Westerholm compares planned new laws to a new McCarthyism that will hunt down and silence critics of immigration.
The government, through a more repressive and restrictive media legislation, they will be able to shut independent media voices down.
Swedes will proudly tell you that their law protecting freedom of speech is older than the United States. But freedom of speech is being crushed in Sweden and across the Western world in the name of political correctness. And it doesn't matter if what's being crushed is the truth. Dale Hurd, CBN News, Stockholm.
Thank you, Dale. Up next, doctor shortage. We'll show you why certain parts of the country are having trouble finding medical providers. And welcome back to the show. Living in the countryside of America may have some advantages, but not if you need a doctor. Shortages in rural areas mean some 90 million Americans can't count on adequate medical care. That's because physicians simply choose to live and work closer to cities. Well, in order to fight that trend, one California county is undertaking a unique plan to attract more doctors. As Laurie Johnson shows, if successful, it could serve as a model for other communities.
Compared to patients in big cities, a diagnosis of cancer, heart disease, diabetes, and other illnesses can be much worse for folks living in rural communities, largely because of doctor shortages there.
New doctors tend to locate near the medical school where they completed their residency, the years after getting their MD, when they train in their chosen field. Medical schools are usually located in big cities.
That's not the case in Riverside County, California. thanks to a community-based medical school. The University of California, Riverside answered prayers when it opened 5 years ago because the shortage of doctors forced people to either go without medical care or drive all the way to Los Angeles for it.
There are some very real health risks. If you're having a stroke, you don't actually want to be 90 minutes away from your primary source of health care.
That's why the med school's primary purpose is to plant doctors in underserved Riverside County. The dean believes its new crop of 110 residents will go a long way towards meeting that goal.
Where you finish that tends to be predictive of where you will establish a practice and then subsequently be a practicing physician.
In addition to location, money is a strong factor in deciding where to put down roots.
Many new doctors feel the need to land high-paying jobs to pay off their crushing student loan debt, which often tops $200,000. They find higher salaries in big cities.
UC Riverside eliminates that burden by offering free tuition to med students who stay in the area after completing their training.
As of right now, I'm 100% committed to staying here. I'd like, ideally, to go to residency here, and then once graduating from residency, stay within this area.
After growing up in Riverside County, Madeline knows all too well the pain of not having access to medical care.
I really connect with a lot of this community. A lot of them are homeless or struggling below poverty line, have kind of on and off health insurance, which are all things that I've encountered when I was younger.
Unlike many medical schools, UC Riverside doesn't bother with a big, expensive teaching hospital. Residents here train at smaller healthcare facilities scattered across the county. Obstetrics resident Dr. Trina Mansour already sees her presence here making a difference.
There's patients that have had no prenatal care and they come in for delivery, and we have no idea what their medical background is, if they've ever had surgery before, if the baby has any anomalies.
Research shows most doctors would like to set up shop near family if possible. UCR Med's admission process takes advantage of that desire.
So recruiting from students from this region is an absolutely central pillar to what we're doing.
Dr. Douglas Grover, a Riverside native, graduated from UCR Med last year.
After my residency training, I plan to stay in the area and give back to the community where I grew up in.
As a resident in psychiatry, he feels good about providing mental health services here.
Things at home, families, broken relationships that really affect the younger kids. And at times they don't have anybody to go to talk to about it.
Another big difference at UC Riverside, students start seeing patients in year 1 rather than waiting until their 3rd year. These students even opened a free clinic for folks who otherwise might not have ever seen a doctor.
But every time I hear that, my heart warms a little bit because it's just one person that we're able to help a little bit more that hadn't had the help previously.
So while medical care disappears in many rural areas, Riverside County may have discovered the antidote. Open a medical school, admit locals with a heart for the underserved, and pay for their education, provided they don't take their talents elsewhere. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
What an innovative idea. Paying education is a big part of that puzzle. Thank you, Lori. Well, folks, we will be back right after this. And finally on the broadcast this week, Operation Blessing is putting smiles on the faces of children across Guatemala. Health teams visited public schools to reach kids as young as 6 years old who were in dire need of dental hygiene work. Operation Blessing taught the students how to clean their teeth and gave each child a free dental exam, cleaning, fillings, and fluoride treatments. Students also received toothpaste and a toothbrush to take home. Well, you can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. We hope you will join us again next time. Until then, from all of us here in the studio, have a great day today.